Hey, everybody, welcome back to Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout and to our show, Issues and Challenges in Today's Fire Service. And Chief Halton, Bobby, first of all, before I even go further, we've been doing that one for a long time, but long before we actually did this podcast. You and John and I were doing Issues and Challenges at FDIC and on the road. But I'm Chief Rick Lasky Chief McGrath, Terry is tied up in traffic. He's coming back from a meeting in Dallas. So we might get Terry. We might not, but like I said, he's on his way back from the Big D from a meeting, so we might have Terry. If not, we'll get him next month. But we've got the rest of our crew. Chief Salka is going to be joining us soon. We've got Chief Scott Thompson, and we've got the boss, Chief Bobby Halton, as always. And I think Scott thinks, and Bobby, I think we all think we've got a pretty good topic for you today. Today, our topic is the shift schedule, whether it's 24/48s, 48/96s, 24/72s, whatever. We title it What Works Best for You. As a reminder, we always shoot this out there to you. If you have any questions, zip over to Twitter and send them out our way, and our producer, Pete, will send them to us. We try our best to get to them. Sometimes there's so many we can't, but hang in there with us. Just make sure you add hashtag FE Talk. And we always start this off. We got the boss with us. We got a couple minutes here at the beginning. Chief Halton, all the calls for papers, we talked about this last time, were good. I know you and Diane and your crew, I always say, and I think I even commented a couple, I don't know how you guys do it. I know what it's like for me to go through the hundreds you send me, and I'm honored to do it. I've been doing it for you since 96. But then not only are you reading the classes, you're reading the reviews, from your editorial, your staff, advisory board, and then you're trying to fit them into so many classrooms you have available, and you're trying to give new guys and gals a chance and try to. I have no idea how you do it. So it's either got to be a lot of alcohol, or what therapy or something. But you guys pull it off. So, but we're looking good, right, for April?
Yeah, no, and I don't drink, so it makes it extremely difficult. But we were over 1,200 people sent proposals, and as if you're someone who's, hey, it looked like John was coming. There's Chief Salka.
Better late than never.
You look a lot like your picture. Maybe better. Maybe better. Maybe better. So I was just saying, we had about 1,200 people send in proposals, and as you guys all know, you can send in two. So we had roughly, I don't know, 24 or 2,600 proposals to look through, and you count the hot and all that good stuff. So it's been fascinating. And the God's honest truth, Diane Rothschild said something at the meeting, and with all sincerity, I'm not making this up. For once, I'm not making something up. So
I didn't say that.
Hey, no, one of my favorite books is by my buddy Dan Ariely, and the book is called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, or Why We Lie All the Time, but Mostly to Ourselves, which is a fascinating book. It's a great book. He's a behavioral economicist. It's a wonderful book to read. And Dan is actually, he was burnt over 90% of his body as a young soldier in the Israeli army. And now he's the chair of the Duke Behavioral Economics Department. And just a wonderful man to listen to speak. I've had the pleasure of hearing him speak twice. And brilliant gentleman, and very insightful, and hysterically funny. The guy is just hysterically funny. So anyway, long story monotonous. We wade through as much as we could, and we tried to be as fair as we possibly could to everybody. And obviously, in these times of recession and such, we had to deal with that and budgeting and all the rest of it. So it's a very, very complex problem. But Diane said, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't think of her exact quote, but she said, we could take all of these proposals and have, they're all worthy of a great show. You know what I mean? And it was fascinating. I said, we had 178, 180 leadership proposals. It'd be the world's greatest leadership conference. We had, 80 or 90, 60 or 70, 89, whatever. It would be the greatest engine show you ever had. It would be the greatest this show that you could ever have. And the sincerity and the depth and the work that everybody put into it, I just can't say thank you enough. We're not done. It's been going on now. It's the agony, the ecstasy. It's like the passion We started the process on the 25th of July. I'll be in Indianapolis tomorrow to look at some sites and work on some of that. And I'm hoping, and then I have to be in Connecticut on Sunday and then San Antonio on Thursday. But I'm hoping to be able to wrap it up when I'm in New York City with you, John, on the 6th and the 7th at the lithium ion symposium. So I'm hoping I'll be able to wrap it up there before I go to St. Louis on the 12th. So we're hoping to be able to finalize it, but it's just that it's agonizing. I spoke with Dan DeYear from Dallas yesterday, who put in 2 proposals that didn't get picked up, but he's on our wait list. And because we always have men and women who can't make it for whatever reason. They have an ingrown toenail, they had a hair waxing appointment for that day. Things happen, and we understand that. So it's incredibly difficult. But I would like to take this opportunity for a moment. One of the things we do at FDIC is we have great keynoters, and it's going to be Brian Brush, Brian Zaitz, and Dan Sheridan this year. And the Lifetime Achievement Award winner this year is a fella who you may have heard of. And Terry, it does look good. The nasal job was the best. The eyebrows. I think they did a really good job on your eyebrows. Terry's getting waxed. So Steve Chikarotis is going to be the Lifetime Achievement Award winner. How's that, huh?
Right.
Isn't that just phenomenal news? And I flew to Chicago. I was hoping to see Steve for dinner, but a gunfight erupted outside the restaurant, so we had to flee for cover. And we weren't able to get together, but I did tell him by phone, and he's just thrilled.
What a great guy. What a great guy.
You're
Great
not
boss.
You're
Great
not
boss,
kidding.
great firefighter, but what a great guy.
Right. And that's the one thing that I always wait till selection time to announce, right? And training achievement, that's another process. We're waiting for all those applications to come in, and then the instructor society and I'll sit down and we'll go through all those with our board. And it's always past winners that participate in that, past instructor. So we don't have that name yet. But the other thing that we do is we always try to look ahead to, which will be 2024, which is going to be an incredible year. I think, for the fire service. Remember, the fire service always thrives in times of adversity. Fire engineering was founded in 1877 in the midst of a terrible recession. But just a horrible time for the American economy and in general, just a rough time. And then FDIC was founded in 1928, November of 1928. So we all know what happened.
Great timing. Huh?
Yeah, 1929 wasn't exactly a banner year for the economy either. So. But the fire service tends to thrive. And the reason for that is that the principles and virtues and values of the fire service hasn't changed much. And so it keeps the fabric of society together, and it becomes stronger in times of adversity because men and women that belong to the fire service know that they're needed more than ever. And so they step up. Our recruitment goes up, our retention goes up, our volunteerism goes up, all of that. So 2024, we're looking forward to that because it's got to be one of those years that just really just blows off all the other numbers. I mean, it just has to be like the best show we've ever done. So in looking for the people that are going to headline that show, we were able to secure Jason Hubbleman, who I think is just going to be amazing. And how do you compare, somebody of that stature? Jason's young, he's innovative, he's brilliant. He's probably one of the most thoughtful and honest people you're ever going to want to meet. And I'm trying to think of, how do I balance a guy like that? I mean, how can I put, because you got to have balance on both days, right? And it dawned on me that there's a guy who, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. I got something, I don't know where I put it.
Your book.
I got a guy that you might recognize his book. I was going to see if we could get a hold of this guy and ask him if
Yeah.
So I don't know. You guys know who this guy is?
Yes.
The dysfunctional.
I don't know if you'll be able to get him, Bobby, because
the dysfunctional fire company. I don't know.
He's very busy out there on the lecture circuit, I hear.
First of all, I always joke about it, about the fact his guys, the men and women that work, the people working the colony, if they only knew how much he wore the rest of us out about how he brags about them everywhere he goes, which you got to love that in a chief.
No, wait
love
a
my
second,
guys. I
Lasky.
love my
Lasky,
guys.
let me back
But
you
you
up.
do. You brag about them everywhere you go.
No, let me back you up. This guy's been wearing me out since really 2000, but 2003 he really became a drain on my emotional, because I had to listen to him brag about Louisville, and then I got to brag about the county. Then it's like, there are other places besides Texas. It's not, Texas isn't on the back of a giant turtle, and if you go to the edge, you don't fall off. Remember that?
It is a separate country, though. It is a separate country.
Congratulations, Scott. Are you willing to do it?
Yes, sir. Thank you. A tremendous honor. Thank you,
That
sir.
is
very
awesome.
much.
That is awesome.
So one of the things that we do at FDIC, because it's FDIC, is we ask you on this year when you're there, and there's a big dud. Scott's going to make the show. You made the cut. It was close.
I know, it always is.
Teasing. So we ask you to come to the rehearsals in shadow, and Rick can tell you it's important. You learn how the teleprompter people work. You get to see how the stage people will work with you. It's really important because it helps you to understand what you're going to do on stage, right? And how you're going to be the most authentic Scott Thompson you can be, right? Because otherwise you get up there and you're not familiar enough yet with that stage, right? And I mean that stage by yourself.
Well, and Bobby, if I could, it only takes one hiccup to throw you off.
Oh,
You're standing up in front of thousands of people. You can feel there's an energy you feel when you get up there. And if I may, Bobby, I told this to guys, I said this umpteen times. You heard me say it, John and Bobby. Leo Stapleton in 1996 gave me the best advice I ever got. He was talking before I was getting the Innovator Year Award for Saving Our Own. And he said, you look nervous, kid. I go, yeah. He goes, well, first thing, go over there and empty your stomach contents in the trash can. He goes, number two, get out there. Don't look at your wife. Don't look at your family. Don't look at anybody. He goes, don't look out to the crowd. You see a guy doing this. He's got gas. He's not mad at you. But you're going to look and go, he doesn't like what I'm saying. And this is what he said. He goes, talk to them exit lights. He goes, when you get out there, you start talking, and he goes, and before you know it, you're looking at people. You're not intimidated. He goes, and I'm telling you, what an icebreaker for a speaker. You go out there, you go, you're nervous. You go, okay, because it looks like you're working the room, and before you know it, you are working the room. And it kind of, but it is.
Everybody's different, so that's why I have guys and gals do it, because like I actually look at people. I pick people out and stare them down, or try to wake them up. One or the other. But so everybody's different, but it gives you a chance to develop your authentic style, right? It's like leadership.
And you're right, Bobby, because you get to see where the screens are and the speakers up on the stage, and you're not going to stumble over something and mess,
one
hiccup. Territory.
And the other thing I emphasize, and the reason why I do it a year early, people go, why do you do it a year early? Because you got to memorize your talk. I had the experience early on in FDIC. I think it was my second year at FDIC. And on Thursday, I went up and I knew my talk pretty well, but my teleprompter went completely out. We lost everything. So I had no support whatsoever for 25 minutes. And it worked out fine. But I always make people bring a paper copy and a binder that they put down there. So if things go horribly wrong, you take out your notes. So you can always, you're going to know your talk pretty much, but you can always refer back. You know what I mean? We're not encouraging people to read, but I want you, you gotta, it develops a sense of ownership and a sense of comfort. And so, so when you look at your schedule, Scott, if I have you doing your workshop on Tuesday, then you need to drop in on Monday. And if I have you on Monday, then you need to be there on Tuesday. But work with Diane and Rob Maloney and my stage people. And I'll try to drop by and talk with you and just introduce you to some of my people back there.
And you can introduce your people to his people. And,
Well, thank you very much, Bobby. Tremendous honor. Thank you.
Excellent.
Hope I can do you proud, brother.
It always.
Scott, you might need a security detail. So we can talk after the show.
The other, so if you do get, so to everybody out there who we love and we respect, honest to God, if you get a rejection letter, it's not personal. Please put in again next year. If you haven't written for us, and we don't know you, you might be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but you've got to develop a relationship with us, and you don't have to write for Fire Engineering proper. You could write for GEMS, you could write for Firefighter Nation, you could write for Fire Rescue Magazine, you could write for Peter online on fe.com. But you got to get familiar with us, right? Because you might be the greatest thing in the world, but I've got people like John Salka and Ricky Lasky and Scott Thompson and Terry looking at your proposals, and if we've never seen your work, we just we can't. It's so discriminating that we have to be so discriminating with, and we have to be so sure of ourselves, because it's so important on this stage, and resources are so limited, and there's so much competition. And I think that's a good thing. We pick the very, very best proposals we think we possibly can, and that's okay. Merit matters. We discriminate for the very best people we can possibly get, and we believe that we get them. And it doesn't mean that other shows aren't great too, because those same great people go to those other shows, and those other shows are absolutely wonderful as well. And I intend to be at all of them that I possibly can. I'm going down to Cleveland or Cincinnati. It's Cleveland. I'm going down to Cleveland and be with John and my friends from Firehouse. They do a wonderful show, but we try to maintain the original intent of FDIC. It's a train the trainer. It's a sharing of knowledge. It's an exchange. That's what it is. It's not just a conference. And so when we bring a guy like Scott in, and we bring a guy like Jason in, and Jason has an equally wonderful book. I should probably wave Jason's book. It's another wonderful book. So I think, and those are the men and women who make it to that big stage. Brian Brush with the Rescue Project. Danny Sheridan has a book coming out with us in April, and a very prolific writer. And he's got a great story to tell. And Brian Zaitz is doing phenomenal work with the Instructor Society, which is a group that we really want to promote and support, because teaching matters, and we're all teachers. We're all teaching all the time. The question is whether you're teaching well or poorly. That's all it is. And it doesn't matter if you just got hired yesterday. You're teaching somebody something. So Scott, thank you so much for accepting and for being such a great supporter of Fire Engineering and FDIC. We really do appreciate it. And everybody out there, I feel so bad. Please call me if you didn't get accepted, and I'll talk to you. I'll help you. I talked with Dan DeYear yesterday for an hour in the Chicago airport, and I think we've got some ideas for him. And he's a wonderful Dallas battalion chief. You guys know Dan?
No, Dan. Well, yeah, he's a good one.
He's a great guy, a great speaker. So please reach out. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, and my phone number's out there. I don't hide it. It's 201-406-8278. Call me. 1-800-SPANK-ME. That's what it comes. I'm just kidding. It's
Bobby. It just occurred to me. You said Jason was the young up and comer, and you had to balance that out. So what does that mean? The old has been.
Well, hey, so as long as we're talking,
doesn't always come out right.
As long as we're talking about tenure and time and everything.
One last thing. Can I share one last thing?
Sure.
I hired David Rhodes. He started working for us on August the 1st, and David's now my XO. And so he's going to be working with me every day. He's going to be working on, I got him assigned to multiple projects. And so hopefully in 2 or 3 years, when I'm going to move, I'm moving to a more strategic level. So David's going to be taking on more and more responsibilities as time goes on. And so it's working out really well. I'm going to stay totally involved with FDIC and fire engineering and all that stuff. But I've got a books division now. I've got an online fire academy now. I've got 3 magazines. I've got 4 websites. I've got more than I can say grace over. So I needed to bring on an XO. And so David's officially my XO. So he'll be doing a lot more, and he has a lot more authority. And you guys all know David. So just that if anybody's, I'm not leaving. I'm just, we're creating a more functional structure, and we're creating a roadmap with, if you will. And I'm going to be hiring a second XO. So kind of like, I guess, be like like if you think of an aircraft carrier, you've got the boss and the mini boss, right? So you've got a you've got the captain, you may have an admiral on the ship and then a captain, and then you've got the air boss, and the air boss handles all the planes. The captain's worried about the overall ship, but the air boss. So I'm hiring an air boss to kind of run, to work with me on the EMS side, because that's just I think it's a grossly underserved aspect of the American Fire Service, and we need to correct that. We're providing about 85% of the medical care out there on the streets, and that deserves more attention. And it involves a huge amount of resource. So I thank you for letting me burn so much of your time, Ricky. I will be in Connecticut on Sunday. If anybody's up in the Stratford area, I think that's where I'm staying. I'd love to see you. And then I'll be in New York City at Randall's Island for the lithium ion deal. And I'll be spending a couple of days on Long Island visiting with my friends, Mark Gregory and a bunch of the guys in Suffolk County and Nassau County. I'm going to be hitting a few of the stations there for just some lunches and some short talks. So hope to see you there. And then I'll be in St. Louis with the guys from Kirkwood, Missouri. I'll be in Kirkwood for 2 days, speaking for 2 days. I think I'm speaking the 14th and the 15th, or the 13th and the 14th. They're all day seminars, which means they're about 4 hours, because at my age, all day is about 4 hours. So come hang out. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. But that's the other thing. We brought David on so that I can get out more and I can visit more and I can get more connected. So hope to see everybody out there. Sorry.
No need to apologize. First of all, you're the boss. Secondly,
Great choice.
That's all great news. And I asked you for the update for a reason, because a lot of people ask questions, that sometimes you don't always get off a website or whatever. You need to hear right from the person making the decision. So I appreciate it, Bobby. And that's great news about Rhodesy. David's freaking awesome. But so let's get to our topic. Let's get to our deal here. And what's fun about this particular topic, the shift schedule, and we listed as 24 48s, 40 96s, 24 72s, et cetera, whatever works best for you, because there's people on this show that are fans of certain kind of shifts and they really don't like other kind of shifts. And we've got one guy on the show who I always go to when I have questions about 48 96. We'll get to that in a little bit. But before, I think we need to go back and start the beginning. And we talked about this once before, and I'll point towards our buddy John, about when this all first started with the career firefighters. I mean, the first career fire department was Cincinnati. We know that, and how Local 1 and 2 was decided way back when. But in New York City specific, John, now correct me if I'm wrong. I remember this. We talked about this not too long ago. So when you lived at the firehouse back in the old days, I remember Glenn Corbett, we were doing the show about the Metropolitan Fire Department, how when the MFD took over, or when it changed MFD and they went from volunteer to career back in 1845.
1865.
And then they came back and they changed everything later, when they did, that there weren't even fire alarm boxes on the quarter.
1865.
You had to run. Well, that 1865 organized, right? The FDNY.
MFD only lasted 3 years, and then Boss Tweed got it back from him. And 1868, ownership went back to the city, so he could get his filthy little fingers on it.
Well, that being said, the firefighters are living at the firehouse. You had to run to the firehouse. There were no alarm boxes. I have no telephones. John, and let's talk about real quick that schedule. You lived at the firehouse, and I remember you talked about before, was it like 3 hours off a night and a day off a week? Or
it was called continuous duty. It was sort of like military service, except you got an hour off 3 times a day. So each guy could go home, and everybody lived within a couple of blocks. If you look at the old journals, the front page was the roster, and everybody, if the firehouse was on 19th Street, everybody lived 3 blocks south or 3 blocks north, and then I'm not confused, but I'm not exactly sure how long. And they got 1 day a week that developed into 1 day a week off as well. So they had a day a week off, and then all the other days they were on all day except for 3 hours. And of course, the captain, the company commander, managed that, giving guys an hour off here and an hour off there, and coming and going, and all the shenanigans that went on there. But so continuous duties are pretty close description. Yeah.
Well, and so we hit on that. I remember Glennie when Glennie was on, because you two were talking about that, and then how it evolved to the then the 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, the 24 on, 24 off, and so on and so forth. And then we evolved to 24 48s. And we can get into this bit here about now all the overtime generated with that. And then we got into Kelly days, and I'll never forget this, guys. Well, I remember in Bedford Park. I remember when we went to Kelly Days, we're negotiating that with the union, that for the village board to understand that they're going to have to hire more firefighters to give guys a day or two off a month, and they're going to save money. And they were like, wait a minute, we're going to give guys days off, and we're going to hire more people, and we're going to save money, which when you looked at what you were spending in overtime versus what you're doing, and that, that kind of worked out good too. And then we'll throw these out there. They got it to 24/72s. Like I know in Chicago for the paramedic side, they did that where, an extra shift. So 24/72 kind of eliminated that. And then you've got, Coeur d'Alene was what, 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, 24 off, like 3 or 4 days off. John, what was Detroit's?
Oh God, 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, like 5 days off.
Yeah, 5 days.
Or maybe 6. I can't remember what it was.
We had a schedule for a while that was 3 12s, 3 8s, 3 10s on days, and then 3 14s on nights, and then 2 off, which was
and then
crazy.
2 off. What were they wearing? Black and white stripes with chains on their ankles?
Yeah, it was a crazy schedule, man. It was.
Well, let me tell you another thing before you go much further in time down the calendar. I don't know where it was exactly, but on the calendar, but like in the 60s and 70s, it was a big deal in the FDNY working more than 24 hours. Working 24 hours has been and is still till right now. You don't work more than 24 hours, period, with a padlock on it. There is not a discussion about that, not the union, not the city, nobody. And there were other departments that were in on that bought in on that for health reasons and, durability, and the guys are going to last longer. And a lot of places went away from it. They gave that up when other stuff came up that was either more convenient or worked better for their people. FDNY is one of the few places that it has not changed. And we don't do 24s, but you can work 24. So we do 2 days and 2 nights, right? With some time off in between. And most guys just swap stuff around. So when they're doing 2 days, they find a guy that's doing 2 nights. They each take one of each and they work at 24. It's all self-regulated. I mean, technically the officers.
So 9-hour days, John?
9-hour days and 15-hour nights, for whatever the hell it comes out to be. Yeah, so 1 and 1, the thing is to have ultimate flexibility. A guy can work the straight tours, or he can work the straight tours Monday and Tuesday. And then when his night tours come up, he can work the 24 with his partner. You have to be good to your partner because your partner's the one guy in the company that can work for you. Everybody else is they're too far off on the schedule to help you out,
So already there's some variables. We just talked about all the different configurations of shifts that are in the fire service alone. And then you got a place where you could show up for your evening tour, and that's your 24, or you can show up at 9 o'clock. Some places you can show up at 6 or 6:30 because traffic's so horrendous. They want to get there and get an early start.
To John's point, we used to have you could do mutual trades, and then we came up with what they called the super scam, where you had a 3-way. So the schedule kind of created itself where I was. In other words, everybody was trading at one point. Everybody said, well, we just got to go to this schedule. And then once they went to that schedule, then they started trading again. And then it was 3 people trading. And it was, this person worked for this person, was working for that person. And then that person it was like, holy cow.
And that was mostly controlled by the company officer with a ballpoint pen, either in a journal or on a trade record card or something like that. Exactly. And computers and time sheets, sort of did away with that. Actually, the guy that did away with that was the guy, I think, in Boston that was selling his day tours or paying people for his day tours. And somebody in the FDNY downtown with a pair of bifocal glasses said, that's interesting. I wonder what our people are doing. And then they started looking into it. So there may have been a rule for no 24s, but I'll bet guys are doing more than 2. You can do anything you want when there's a rule for no 24s, because all the bosses don't do 24s because that's the rule. So when they go home and the guy continues on duty, nobody even knows it because the guy that regulates it just went home. I mean, how easy this is.
We've talked about this before about, the Department of Labor, I have the links I send you all the time that, day trades are transparent to your payroll. They can't create overtime. In fact, they actually encouraged at one point, don't even keep track of them. Well, if you don't do that, you end up with the guys that are either working too much or this whole, and this is another rabbit hole we can go down another day, is paying guys to work your days off, which the IRS frowns upon, unless you're going to start sending people W-9s and everything, or W-2s, that whole thing. We saw, not to mention different departments across the country, guys got charged with a crime and they went to trial because they were selling. There's one department had a website that came up to jam them up, 24 off, Scott, or whatever it was, or Terry, So, and guys during the Super Bowl were paying $1,000 and $2,000 to be off that day.
That'll be the day.
Paying people to work their shifts, which we can hold off with that one for a second. But
I want to correct one thing you said. In the FDNY, at least, I don't know where else, days and nights are equal. 15s and 9s are equal. Nobody keeps track of hours. So you could work all 15-hour shifts. Every time your day tours come up, you can work the nights instead. And the other guy who wants to be home at night all the time because his wife's got a baby or he's got 9 kids, he can work straight days all the time. You can work straight nights all the time, just as a matter of swapping stuff off. And there's nobody saying, uh-oh, you have too many hours at the end of the year and you don't have enough. Nobody, they don't keep track of the hours.
We had a guy that had an outside gig, and I remember this because I was the union steward at the time, and he was paying other guys and gals to work for him all the time. So he was pretty much not coming to work. And what happened was the pension board heard about it, and it became a fraud case because he was making money someplace else. He was getting paid to be at work at the fire department and collecting a pension on it. They said, you can't do that.
And medical leave and all the other benefits, right?
You got to physically be there in order to collect the benefits. And so that's how that stopped.
But he's making more in his part-time job than he was at the firehouse, so he could
Some of them are still around. Some of them guys are still around.
And we've said this before, the whole be here now thing that Jerry Wells does about, when you work at 24, show up and do your job. I don't care what you do on your days off. I had a roofing business, with a bunch of guys working for me. But the other side of it is how you get jammed up. And Terry, I know you're familiar with a department that went through this where they had a guy paying guys to work his shift forever. And, I guess there was an officer that just said, well, we knew what was going on, but, he was always a problem when he's here anyway. And, that kind of stuff and so on and so forth. And then they had to work through.
It's interesting that Chief Salka brings up about the 15-9 and no one's in there going, well, I know, but I actually worked 30 hours and only worked 18. I've always viewed this as a fantastic profession, and the schedule is certainly adds to all the exciting and great things about this job. And for somebody like myself, and I would suspect everyone on this panel, if you were to say things like, Chief, I always use this. This was a classic line you told me when I came on as your investigator, and about after hour call outs and being on call and kind of how disruptive that is or whatever. But what you told me was make it work. Right. And so make it work. And you know what? I knew exactly what that meant was I'm not going to take more from the city than I'm willing to give. And it's going to be fair and equal to both parties. Right. I'm not going to nickel and dime you. I'm not going to game the system. I'm not going to sit around here and figure out ways that it benefits Terry McGrath. I'm going to figure out a way that Terry McGrath and the city of Louisville both benefit from a great opportunity.
Well, and I used to tell you guys, Scott, you included, do not give me any overtime. You have so much overtime for callbacks. Do not give me any overtime back. I fought hard for that. And when you run out of overtime, you make it work throughout the year. Then you start flexing time off to make sure we're doing what's right by HR and all that stuff and so on and so forth. But that being said, and again, if we have time, maybe we talk about a little more in depth about this whole paying people to work your shifts kind of thing, which John, you and I bring it up in classes, and there's people that go, well, we're allowed to do. I'm like, no, you're not supposed to do that. But anyway, one of the big things, and I want to throw this out there before we run out of time.
Being allowed to do something doesn't make it legal.
Well, and it's funny.
Right, but you know what, Bobby? Sometimes the department, in their ignorance or in their lack of investigation, sometimes the department sort of either looks away or actually does say, yeah, that's okay, fellas. And they don't have a legal, there's some little cities don't have a legal department that, they never looked into it. So it could be technically illegal according to the tax code or the state law. And there might be a department doing it thinking, we're okay. That could be an innocent violation.
Oh, you're exactly right. I met a kid the other day and he had a goatee and he was on the job, career job. And I said, how do you get away with that? And he goes, oh, we're allowed to have them. I'm like, I want to check with the federal OSHA guidelines and the federal code of regulations about wearing an SCBA, man, because no, you can't.
Bobby, a department here in our area is allowing that now. They're
You
allowing
can't. You
careers.
can't. Unless you don't want to
Well, you
have them wear
can't unless
SCBA.
something happens. If
I'm
nothing
telling you,
happens,
right.
unless somebody drops a dime.
No, actually, there was a department in New Jersey that just got fined, like, I think it was like $12,000 per person that they found per day. It was like a massive, somebody out there in Jersey probably knows, but it was
That'll
like
slow
a
it down.
massive penalty. Yeah. Oh, trust me. The government, they got 87,000 new IRS agents. They'd love to hear this.
Don't bring that up. Don't bring that up. I don't like to think about it.
Well, it's true. So, and John, and you and Bobby, in the past couple of days, we talked about this. Both said almost the same thing about the guys and gals out there will make the shifts work, and they'll make what works best for them. Because some places would fight you to go away from 24/48. Some guys would fight you to 20. Some guys would fight you, like FDNY would kill you if you try to take that schedule away from them. And so what I want to get to, because, and Terry, you remember you and I talking about this, but when I was interim in Trophy Club, a great fire department, and going as interim, right? You go in, Bobby, you go, so what do you guys want? Now's your chance. Ask me, because I'll go fight for you, because I'm just the interim. And the first they said, they go, we want to go to 4896s. And I said, okay. I said, look, I don't care. I don't work it. You have to work it. But if we're going to do this, you have to make it work. A year from now, we're going, oh, we don't like, we'll go back the other way. So Shane Beck, the one captain, Shane's a great guy. He had done all the research, and then he went out and he called you, Bobby. He talked to you. I talked to him. Remember, you were when I talked to you, and when Shane talked to you, I had his phone, you were actually running. You were doing your thing for the hour you're talking to us, you were running the whole time. I'll never forget that. And, Shane did all his homework, and we set up, we could talk about how to make it work in a second. But I said, you need to call Bobby Halton, Chief Halton, because Albuquerque, correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby, were the first ones in the country back in the 80s to go to this schedule. So if you want to hear the do's and the don'ts, because the first thing you did was hook me up with an ops chief. And the first thing he said was, well, first of all, your sick time is going to go down about 2/3, because guys aren't calling in sick to go on their hunting trip, and having, that in between shift, because they got 4 days off. He goes, the other thing it does, it reduces your guys' travel to and from work by 1/3. But he goes, the caveat, the hookups with that is, we've got two mandatory overtime lists, an A and a B, and you better answer your phone, and we can't, blah, blah, blah. You want this, that's great. But like I said to those guys, you have to make it work. So, and Bob, I remember calling you because there was an assistant chief next to me that popped off at a meeting. Thank God he's retired. About how I'm endangering the lives of the firefighters. And this is just a shift for lazy drivers that don't want to check their rigs, and blah, 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 blah. And I looked at him, I said, so you've got a guy mandatoried right now. You're on a 24/48 schedule. You just mandatoried a guy to work the next day. He got up for a call in the middle of the night. Let's just say one call at 1:30 for an hour and 15 minutes or 2:30. You've already, I'm not whining, but you've already disrupted his, one or two, that's it, not 9 calls with Chief Salka, like what happens, one call or two, and you're still banging pots and pans and setting off alarms at 6 o'clock to wake him up to go check the same rig he was driving like 2 hours ago. And then you go to a class on sleep deprivation. I mean, you're calling me names and saying, I don't know what I'm doing. And you're talking out of your ass here, out of your sector C, because you're mandatory. And Terry, you and I talked about this.
Talk out of their ass, okay?
Scott, you remember the on Mill Street, we had all the storage buildings going, right? And we were there from like 1:30 to 4:30. We had a bunch of them. And I remember going get clean. I get back in, I go over to Central for coffee, and Tommy Encina is there. He had been working that shift, and he was mandatory. I walk in the kitchen, I go, Tommy, I thought he was hanging out. I go, what are you doing? He goes, I got mandatory today. I go, what are you doing up? He goes, William Boss, we got the policy. We had a policy from 7 to 5. You can't go lay down. I looked at his captain, Tommy Mack. I go put him to bed. And Tommy says, I didn't know. I go, because Tommy's a great captain. I'm like, so I got beat up, Bobby. And I remember calling you going, and then you went off on a tangent about all the studies and all the things. And I loved it because he's accusing me of not being, I think I care about my guys, and I thought it worked out better letting them sleep in if they were up all night than waking them up with pots and pans and shit and tell you got to check the same rig. So Bobby, I'm going to throw 48 to 96 shifts right to you right now. Because
Well-
everybody's marking it. Everybody's, you see it all the time. 4896 shift. So what your thoughts on that?
So I'll start off by echoing Terry. Terry nailed it. The shift works because the troops like it and they make it work. That, in other words, and full disclosure, when they first proposed it, I was the biggest opponent.
I remember you saying that.
I freaking got up at the union meetings. This is dogs and cats sleeping together. It's the end of the world. We'll all end up divorced. I got twins at home that are like, I don't know, like 4 at the time or 2. And this will never work. We'll be falling down dead in the street. I was that guy. I mean, I might
You
as well
wrote a
have
letter.
done-
You said you wrote a letter complaining.
Oh, I
Filed
wrote a letter. I was as good. I was like AOC. I was wearing a dress that said, kill the 4896. I was apoplectic, man. The world was going to end in less than 12 years. It was worse than climate change. All dinosaurs will be resurrected, and it was the end of the world. So anyway, I was that guy. I mean, I was pissed off. I was angry. I was like, you friggin' guys, you'll be apologizing. So like 2 months after we got it, 3 months after we got it, I wrote this. Dear fellow members of a local, whatever we were, I am an asshole. I was completely wrong. I'm the biggest jerk on the face of the planet. Please forgive me. They voted me out of office the next year. But no, it was it. But yeah, I was completely wrong. It turned out to be, for me, the best schedule I've ever worked. And I was on busy companies. I was on at the time, we called it a rescue. It was an ambulance, a fire department, fire-based. We had a fire-based EMS system. And I was on one of those boxes, as they're called, or buses as they're called back east, that just ran and ran and ran and ran. We never took our uniforms off. We got to bed in our clothes.
Albuquerque's always in the top numbers of runs. They're always from engine and ladder and the ambulance.
Oh yeah, we don't have ghettos, we have barrios. So that's our word for those areas, and we have one of the most robust knife and gun clubs in America. We really have. Its membership swells exponentially all the time, and we have excellent weather for things like crime and mayhem, and because it only rains like 2 or 3 days a year out in Albuquerque. So the rest of the time you don't have anything to impede your breaking and entering and your car theft and all that other good stuff. And in Albuquerque, the cops have a motto, just like Bob Dylan: they don't need you and they expect the same. So they're a tough bunch as well, and great cops, super guys. But we would get called out relentlessly. And in New Mexico, traffic signals are suggestions. They're not laws. So people would, the accidents were crazy. And you got to remember, this was back before our awareness about alcohol too. So right now, somebody drinking and driving, and trust me, I've suffered consequences of that. Not as my family's been impacted by drunk drivers, so I get it, right? And so, but back then it was not viewed that way, right? So we would, it was mayhem on the streets, and we were in a busy company, and I really thought it was going to crush us. But here's what was interesting: we looked at patterns, and like my company got clobbered from like 9 p.m. to like 4:35 in the morning, but from like 6 in the morning to like 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon, all of those people are hungover and asleep, right? So we could sleep. So we looked at that, and one of the things we did was we stopped the daily announcements. We stopped the bells to wake you up in the morning. We looked at scheduling and alternative scheduling. The academy was apoplectic at first, but then they started working things out. And then we found that we could do like night training and night drills, and we could do night inspections. And so we could help the guys and gals that used to inspect the bars and stuff for occupancy problems. Well, now we had units that were available because, you weren't keeping the troops up because they could rack during the day. And we got rid of all those rules about you had to wash the rig every day, and all that went out the window. And so cleaning supplies went down, and sick leave went down, and morale went up. And I got to be honest, it really worked for the men and women there. But the other thing to remember is that in Southwestern fire departments, it was not unusual for some of our men and women to travel 50, 60, 70 miles from outside Albuquerque to come into Albuquerque to come to work. We had men and women. We had one fellow who lived in Oklahoma City, and he would fly up with Southwest to Albuquerque to come to work. And that's a true story. And he worked in the last like 5 or 6 years or 10 years of his career, he commuted from Oklahoma City via Southwest Airlines to come to work with us. So for the city of Albuquerque, it was a wonderful, wonderful schedule.
Well, and Bobby, you just said it perfectly, but for the city of Albuquerque, because I want to throw this out there because I just got a little message. What works for one doesn't work for everybody. And to what the guy said it is, we all have said this. We've already commented, like FDIC loves their work schedule. I know guys who work 24/7 that love that. The guys in Detroit love their, there's guys that love their schedules. That's why we title the show what works best for you.
So one of the things to remember though too, Ricky, is that for us and out where in New Mexico, you're driving an F-250 or an F-350 because everybody had a small ranch or whatever. And so your commutes, right, were cut in third. Your overall commutes were cut in third. That's a big savings to a character that's commuting, 150 miles or 200 miles round trip.
And we had guys that, Bobby, that were against it, only two, and they found out that daycare things changed for them in their favor. There was a lot of things that changed in their favor with the 4896. But what I wanted to point out too is, and I think I mentioned already, when I get asked by chiefs to post, we're hiring, it's like almost everyone, maybe every third or fourth, maybe not, but almost everyone is. That's like and I'm going to point this to Scott and Terry, especially. I know it's not just in the Metroplex or in Texas, but that's a big thing now. All of a sudden, it's actually kind of old, if you will. That they're throwing it out there as a bone. Hey, we're doing 4896s. Again, I never worked them. I would have loved to have, but I like the shift I worked. I made it work. You know what I'm saying? So Scott and Terry jump. I mean, besides what Bobby said, there's obviously a reason why as competitive as the job market is for firefighters across the country, especially in Texas, that's a big hook for a lot of people. And Scott, you throw it out there first.
Yeah. Rick, we went to the paramedic, the single role paramedic thing as a recruitment tool, but we went to the 4896 about a year and a half ago for retention because more and more organizations were doing it. And I was fearing going to lose guys. But this is what's interesting. I talk about culture. In the last 14 years, we've had very, very minimal turnover, almost amazingly minimal. But I've had guys that are great guys or solid guys that come and talk to me, come in my office, have coffee and say, Chief, if we go back to 24, 48s, I'm going to leave. I like it. It works well. And so it's been a huge win for us. And we're tracking things very, very closely. Our paramedics, they're like 32 metrics are being measured to make sure skills. And we haven't seen anything negative to it, but I felt like for our little city surrounded by these, Plano and Frisco and all these, we had to do it to survive. And that was the big motivator. And I'd be honest, I was kind of against it up until the Friday morning. I approved it, pulled the trigger and no regrets at all. And I think every organization is going to have to visit it at some point and have a discussion about it because there's going to be more and more going to it, I can tell you.
And when we did the switch, I remember it was like one shift got a little bit extra money, how it worked out. No matter what you do, somebody's going to get a little bit that first time when you change it. But that didn't seem to be a problem. Terry, you get this question around the kitchen table all the time. And I want to ask John, because John, you and I had an example of how one department, hang on with that. I know where you want to go with it, how they make it work with their busy job. But Terry, you get guys around the kitchen table that ask you about this all the time. Just.
Yeah, so we're still a 24/48. This is a hotly debated item or topic around here. Chief would probably kill me just for my approach to this, but the first thing I tell people, and I had this conversation the other day with a guy, is that first of all, I'm not working it. So like for me to say now you're going to get into whether it works or doesn't work, but I would challenge anyone to say that you will be able to find articles and people that have documentation to come on both sides of this issue and support or negate, whichever way you want to look. I will say this, I believe that we will do it, and I will believe we will do it for the reasons that Scott are saying, is that it's a simple fact that you're going to have to stay competitive. And it is something that is attractive to the workforce now. I've never lived more than 30 minutes from where I work. And so we have guys that commute 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. Now, the one thing I will say I don't want as an argument that it allows me to move farther away from here, because again, I roll everything back to what's the benefit. It's got to benefit the community, the citizens. It can't be a one-sided deal. But I see pluses and minuses on it, and to me, I don't know. I don't lose sleep over the idea that we migrate to that. And I'll also throw this out, and Chief Salka could probably verify this. At some point in time, we transitioned from horses to a motorized vehicle, and that wasn't the most traumatic thing. I'm sure at the time it was traumatic, right? All the changes Chief Salka talks about when FDNY went EMS, and oh my God, and yeah, it's the end of the world's coming, and it's new, it's different, and for every organization that hasn't done it yet, there's this queasy feeling in your stomach, because you just fingers crossed that it works out the way you hope it's going to work out. And I would offer up to say that in most of these instances, certainly in Scott's instance, he borders us on the east side. We're not rushing over there to help them. We haven't been involved or helping them digging them out of apparatus crashes because their guys fell asleep, or whatever the case may be. So
and when we first did it in Trophy Club, I remember walking in the first day, and one of the captains, told me, hey, Chief, he goes, it's a little quiet around here. The guys are still in the rack. I said, well, you had an infant CPR last night. You had another call. I go, that's what this is about. This is about, you did one roll call. You did one trip to the grocery store. You went to, everything. And that, back to that chief that said just lazy drivers. So I checked my rig on the first half of my shift, and I was second. Scott, we were just talking about, we spent $900,000 on a pumper, and it's not going to start tomorrow. What have I done to it as the driver? You know what I'm saying? That, I checked it. I checked it, and it's good tomorrow. I haven't left the firehouse, but John, you and I have been places where, because people used to say, I remember back when Kelly days was the big draw, just like when 4896 was a big recruiting tool, giving guys a day off, Kelly days, a day to keep that was like, I used to hear all the time, yeah, they give you 2 Kelly days. You said 10 days a month, you only work 8. But John, we've been places where, and remind me, I don't remember where it's at, but they talked about how they make it work at this busy department with, they overlap, right?
Let me first say about the whole conversation so far is 4896 works. It works well because of 96. Nobody's looking forward to coming to work for 48 hours. Nobody. The fire department doesn't want it. The firemen don't want it. The city doesn't want it. Nobody wants you to do it. You have to tiptoe and walk around, not checking the rigs and going, sleeping late and not banging the pots. And I'm just listening to all the nonsense, right? You have to stumble through the 48 so you can give the boys the 96. And that's why it goes up. Because guys want time off, and they want time off in chunks rather than just your first day off, your last day off, and you're back to work again. So that's the whole thing in a nutshell. And that's why they make fire chiefs and assistant chiefs, to figure all that shit out, to figure out how to make that schedule work, right? And here's one of them that somebody did. Guy came up to me one time, and I have nothing to do with it. I don't know anybody that works 4896, but I understand what it is. And the guy said, oh yeah, he said, our chief was adamant against it. He didn't want, day one, everybody's full of piss and vinegar. Day 2, the whole shift is like, oh, we had a busy night last night. And he said, we don't have that. He said, we have half shifts. There's 2 48s and 96. He said, half the shift comes in for 48. And then their second day, there's another half coming in. Every day, half the guys go home. And every morning, half the guys are fresh. So every single day is identical. It's identical. There's a mixed shift. It's not, oh, be quiet. We had 2 runs last night, the whole shift. No, in the morning, guess what? 4 guys get up out of an 8-person firehouse, and 4 guys go home, and 4 guys come in with the donuts and the bagels, and they're sitting there in the morning checking the rig. So it actually helps. That staggering of the shifts, of the half shift thing, actually helps, because now somebody still can come in and check the rig every day, because there are incoming people every day, even though there's some guys continuing on duty that worked last night. So I thought that was a great, unique, probably, logistical workout. Somebody had to sit down with a pen and a paper and a calendar and figure out. That's not my field, so I don't know how to do it. But somebody did, and it worked, and it works really well. So there's just one example of how you can make that particular shift usable and doable. And that particular adjustment to it makes some of the things that everybody's ready to jettison, that everybody's ready to forget doing and not do anymore. It can make you still be doing it. And and guys still getting their 48.96. You know what I'm saying? Like, so if a guy gets woken up sort of unnecessarily in the morning because he's working day 2, you know what? Life's tough. There's guys that are coming in that day. It's their first day. They want to check their rig. They want to be down in the kitchen having coffee and stuff like that. So, you know, again, it depends on the place. It depends on the culture there. It depends on the guys. It depends on how much it all comes down to how much guys want to have 4 days off. That's all it comes down to. What are they going to give up to have 4 days off?
Well, and it goes back to what everybody here said earlier. The troops will make it work. The men and women will make it work if they want it to work, whatever
If they
shift it
view
is.
it as a benefit to them.
You know, if you rather have the Kelly Day set up, if you rather have the 24/72 or whatever, we were at a place in California, John, where they said, you know, not all of our firehouses that busy. So we have the ability, the union came up with this idea that you can switch, you know, halfway through the shift. Hey, go drive over to that station. You come over here, you go to a station, you know, blah, 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 so on and so forth. But, you know, and they can settle that down.
In 1972, Squad 4 did 11,000 runs. They didn't have to send them somewhere else for the rest of the day to have an easy day. I can't imagine that anybody's busy enough, whatever busy is. I don't know what it is, right? That you have to go to the slow place and finish the second part of the day. You know, sometimes I think this comfort thing and this, you know, working conditions thing gets carried away a little bit. You know, if you don't want to have interrupted sleep, work at the bagel shop. You go home, you can sleep all night long and pull the shades down. Nobody's gonna wake up. Nobody's ringing any bells. You know, I know I'm being an asshole about it, but you know, it's just driving me crazy. If you don't want to check a rig on a 48-hour shift, you know, then why don't we just work 8-hour shifts? You can commute with your neighbor, the cop.
Well, and John, you said
stay
something
awake for 24 hours. You know?
You said something we were together once before, and before we're done with this particular show, and I always remember this. Don't tell people how our shifts work. Don't go home and
let me tell the story real quick because I can't stay late. I got a doc's appointment I have to go to shortly. But so I remember one day I'm looking at Facebook or wherever the hell it was, and these guys are going back and forth. Maybe I was just reading and catching up with like a Facebook. What do they call that? You know, a whole trail of notes, right? And these guys are talking about, you know, sleep interruptions and night shifts and stuff like that. And one guy's like, well, yeah, you know, our alarms are really loud. They're from like the 1960s when Chief Muldoon was here. He had those big loud bells put in. And boy, when those bells go off, you know, for a run in the middle of the night, I think my heart skips a beat. Yeah, me too. We got those loud bells. And you know what? I know a place down the road that stopped doing the bells at night. All they do is these little soft, like, you know, like puff, 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 or maybe some voice comes on. Hello, boys, you have a run. You know, and then they're going into this whole discussion about sleep and sleep deprivation and negative impact of being startled in the middle of the night. And I just had to do it. I had to do it. I just jumped on there. I said, are you guys kidding me? Are you guys kidding me? You're arguing and talking about sleep deprivation. You're talking about your sleep being interrupted while you're at work. Why don't you go get a job putting blacktop holes in the street in Chicago, digging ditches and filling the potholes in Chicago every day. Guys that don't get, they get a half an hour for lunch and not 31 minutes, you know? And we're like, oh my God, they wake us up so suddenly. What are we going to do? You know, it's just, I don't know. I know I'm being insensitive about it, but for God's sakes, just go work somewhere busy. And then they'll stop worrying about whether they got 300 or 400 sheets in their bed,
Well,
you know, with the number of.
So I got a hard break too, but and I hate delicate people, just for full disclosure, can't stand them. So, and I know John's not delicate. So from one asshole to another, you know, I agree with you. Don't tell other people how to manage their house, right? In other words, that's their department. Let them figure it out. If you don't like the 4896, hey, how about a nice big cup of shut the up about their schedule? Because it works for freaking them. You know, if you don't have guys that are traveling a couple hundred miles, you don't have them. If you got guys, you know, and gals that are riding in on the L train and it's just great for them, let them do that. I'm happy as hell for them. The cockles of my heart are rising for their wonderfulness. And if you guys got guys that want to live like they're Joe Namath back in the 1960s and wear big furry coats and mustaches down here, that's your business too. I don't care about your, you know, I don't care how you manage stuff. But the one thing I'll always say is, you know, you got to look every now and then at what's going on and how to make it work best for your people. I mean, basically, that's why we have unions, so that our working conditions aren't like they were for our great grandfathers when you came in and you worked for 5 freaking days and you got 3 hours off during the day, because that was pretty much around the country where they had, you know, paid jobs. It all started out that way. So conditions do change and they get better, and they're and in some ways, you know, I would counter that the guys, and what we saw in my experience with it was that the guys and gals took better care of their equipment and their rigs, and it was real good for us. And so I think every place is a little bit different. New York City is a unique animal. I mean,
It's not about New York City.
no, I mean, I'm just saying, New York City,
no,
I'm just saying, and that schedule works for them. Albuquerque's a unique animal, and that schedule works for them. And so you might find a place where, it's not conducive at all. You might have a smaller community that's completely different, where they might work 8 hour. They might like working 8 hour shifts. They might do something like that. Who knows?
And the same thing with where guys live. And again, people have a different opinion. We have to agree to disagree on that. There are advantages to having guys live in a city, in a town like Chicago. A lot of cities have residency recruits.
Oh, yeah.
It cause the guys to be in the town and stay in the town and be more part of the community and all that nice stuff. However, I know guys in the FDNY, because that's where most of my experience is. I know guys that live 50 miles, 60 miles, 80 miles, 90 miles. I know guys that live the end of Long Island that drive in. I mean, they literally live at the fork, the North Fork of Long Island, and they drive all the way into New York City. And when they get to the firehouse, those guys would burn alive to save those people that live across the street, and they don't even know their names. They don't live in that town. This is not their neighborhood. But they give and dedicate as much to the job as a guy that lives around the corner from the firehouse and has his whole life, So obviously residency in a department, it's hard to find negatives to requiring residency, but there's no negative necessarily to living outside unless a guy gets distracted and that becomes his priority. And
I agree. I'm not a residency fan either. I
never was because I never lived in the city for a minute.
I remember a couple of guys I had, they were friends of mine that maintained apartments within a city limits and really didn't live there, but they had to have that. They had to have that receipt.
Yeah.
Well, Bobby, I know, Bobby, you've got a hard stop at 1:05 here. So closing thoughts from you, and then we'll go to John, and then Terry and Scott will hang out a little bit longer.
Gotta go to me fast because I'm leaving in 1 minute.
Go ahead, John. You go first. I'll
go first. You know what, Rick? You already said it. You can listen to Scott and everybody else here. The variables are innumerable, right? Of how many people do different things, what the hours are, what the requirements are, whether you do your half a shift coming to relief, whether you do 40. We didn't even get into the Detroit schedule. 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, like 5 off or something. It's like they just took 1 shift off the 2 and put it separate and just work a 1 and 1, and then they get 5 off. It's just. So I guess it's whatever the system will bear, whatever the firefighters are willing to, obviously firefighters are an element in the decision here, right? You probably couldn't force this on people, but the department, the chief, the staff, the firefighters, whatever works for your place. And like I said, but I don't think, my only point is I don't think you should be giving up the standards of, you said your people, Bobby, talking about your people. I'm worried about those people out there. I think the rig still should get checked every morning. I still think there are things that should be done in spite of the fact that they make a little noise in the firehouse and the guys are sleeping. I think there are some priorities that should not be changed to facilitate whatever the schedule changes.
And to be clear, not having your rig scoped out and ready to go every day and not paying attention to your rig thoroughly, that your schedule has nothing to do with that.
Well, sure it does, because they're saying if you're doing a 48 the second day, why would you check it?
I didn't say that.
Well, maybe you didn't say it, but people are saying that. Oh, the second day, why would you check it?
Yeah, what I said was, the point he was making was, it's just the lazy job for guys that don't want to check the rigs. And my point was to wake a guy up at 6 o'clock in the morning to check the same rig he was on 2 hours. I always say this: all the good operators are gonna get up 2 hours later, get their coffee, go check their rig. That's what they do. They're gonna check their rig. I didn't say what I was saying. Is he was saying it's a shift for lazy guys that don't want to do their stuff and don't want to check their stuff.
Rig, checking the tools, cleaning the tools, all that work has to get done, and somebody's got to get out of the sleepy mattress to get it done. And just because you had 3 runs last night after midnight, I think I think that has no bearing on being ready for the next day's duty. People don't want to hear, well, sorry, lady, we were a little bit late. We're doing the 48s now. We were sleeping today. Okay, I gotta go, guys.
All right.
As usual, you're completely wrong, John, but that's
okay. Well, Bobby,
I'll wrap up with, everything John said was nonsense, because it doesn't, just because your schedule doesn't make you a bad firefighter, and it doesn't make you a delicate firefighter, because some of the most badass firefighters I know are volunteers. So they're not on any schedule at all. And they could kick my ass 8 ways to Sunday any day on the fire ground all day long. And I admire and I love those guys. And they've never drawn a paycheck in their entire life or spent a single night in a firehouse. And they're some of the most hard charging, squared away, blood and guts firefighters that ever walked the face of the planet. So there's that. And the other side of it is that, you know, nothing's ever going to be the way it is now forever. Trust me. Trust me. I used to have jet black hair last week, and I don't, right? I used to have all my own teeth. I don't, right? So other parts used to work. They don't. So the point is we evolve, right? And the evolution and the younger firefighters and the people who you know, have thoughts about, like somebody said, 24 hours longer shifts are dangerous and sleep deprived firefighters. Okay, you don't know how the guy slept on his 24 off when he came in the next day. So, you know, there goes that argument. The guy could have been up binging on Netflix till 3 a.m. for all you know. So, and sleep deprivation is a funny thing because not everybody sleeps the same way. I had friends that slept better at work than they did at home, you know, and for a lot of reasons. And so anyway, the whole sleep deprivation thing, I'm not sold on it. Plus, if you manage your crews correctly, and like Rick said, you let people sleep in a little longer. You don't do your rig checks till 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever, or you let guys rack out in the afternoon, or tell me that you've never come into a station after the troops have put in a good day's work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and find a guy in a lounge chair taking a nap. We all have. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you know, he's not doing it every day. He's doing it because they got their butts kicked or whatever, or she's doing it, you know, taking a rack because they had a long, you know, they need to. So it's about taking care of your people. And so, you know, Benjamin Disraeli said it best: there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And, you know, you can always find data or reasons to oppose something or be against something. But really smart people figure out how to make things work and how to make things better for people. And if it makes things better for people, that's a good thing.
Well,
And
Bobby, before
Scott's
you
going through
go,
that right now, and it's making his people's lives better, and it's making his community better. And it's not for us to judge what it is he's doing there. It's up for the people that live in the colony to judge.
Bobby, real quick, I'm sorry, but I want to grab this from you before you take off. What Albuquerque's up to? How many stations do you think right now?
Oh God, I'll bet you they're got 30 plus, maybe 40.
It's 30. I thought 35, 40. What? And they've got stations that run their wheels off, and they have stations that aren't as busy. And I've said this before. This is what I told Shane in Trophy Club. You know, I hate the word expert, but you know what? Go to the people. You know, it's like if you want to talk Maydays, talk to Don Abbott because he's done research over 11,000. I think he's got some information for you. If you want to talk 4896s, talk to the departments, talk to the guys that are working. You could talk to a boss. That's great. A boss is going to tell you what they want to tell you. Talk to some of the people that actually work it and find out, do you like it or not? And what are the goods and bads? And, you know, figure out for yourself. Like I said, nobody on this panel is advocating for one shift over the other. I mean, you know, John loves the FDIC calendar because that was his pedigree for 33 years. You know, I never worked anything but a 24/48. Some people work 24/72s. You worked the 48/96. That was the whole point of today's discussion was, hey, let's talk about all these different shifts and what works and what really makes them work. But what advice would you give, Bobby? You did it for me and did it for Shane. You know, somebody says, you know, Terry's like, God, the guys that work with kitchen table, they're talking this shift or they want to go to this shift or whatever. What would you say?
What I would say is take a hard look at it. If you have a majority of your people, a good majority of your people who want to go to it, you can always do it on a pilot project. In other words, there's a way to shift from just about any schedule to where you can balance out the FSLA and the pay and all of that on a temporary basis. If you say, hey, let's give it a shot for 3 months or 6 months or whatever you want to do. And then like Scott's doing, you evaluate metrics. You look at, you know, all job performance, you look at sick leave, you look at injury rates, you look at all that good stuff to see if you spot any trends. And then you try to discover, and you look at your policies and procedures and all the rest of it. The one thing that it does do, and I'll warn you on this, it forces your company officers and your station commanders to become more responsive to the physical realities of their people. In other words, we look at people as if they're machines and they come to work and they're ready to go and they're hard. That's not always true. Everybody's different. and so it forces those officers to really start to understand people's rhythms, right? Their biological capabilities, and it's a really fascinating deal. It forces them to be better officers. And because things aren't on this, you do this, it's floor day, it's this day, you do that, at this time we did, it forces them to manage that in a way it's on them, right? Like if you're the battalion chief and you come in and the place looks like trash or things aren't done, they're the people that get called on the carpet and stand on the yellow squares and have to explain why the station isn't up to standard, right? And we had that. We ran inspections in Albuquerque, and I was one of the hardest asses out there. I mean, it was interesting. I was one of the hardest asses to work for in that system, irrespective of what position I was in, and I wouldn't go back and change a thing. If you're looking to be popular by going with the status quo or keeping things the way they are, good luck with that. Good luck with that. There's nothing more transitory, or they say there's three things that, if you remember when Jesus was tempted, the first was food, gluttony, right? Then it was power, and then it was the esteem of men, right? So all three of those are like the three biggest demons in life, right? And if you're looking for people to idolize you, or you're everybody's buddy, good luck with that. That's not how the world works. And people will like you far more for being authentic and real. And that's why I like John. He'll say stuff, and I love to argue with him because he's never right. I mean, come on. So, he's loud and he's funny, but he's always wrong, which is great, because all you have to do is wait for him to calm down and just say, okay, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. And that's more nonsense. And I love him. But I mean, and he's one of my dearest friends. He knows I'm saying this right now. And if he was here, he'd go, oh, you're Halton. Well, you're wrong in this. So, but that's what we need, right? Like right now, everybody's going with groupthink. Like, oh, I got an email from our core people saying, and we're going to encourage groupthink. Really encourage groupthink? No. Everybody, if you value diversity, then you better to value argument and other opinions. And the guy Truckman who came up with groupthink, he was the big guy who codified groupthink. Groupthink was a word invented in the 70s for, people go, oh, let's all do kumbaya and sing, and don't everybody disagree? And, and people are agreeing to stuff that they don't agree with. That's gibberish. Argue fiercely, defend your position. Doesn't mean I love John Salka. I think he's wrong, but I love him. You know what I mean? And so that was the best part of this whole discussion. And the other thing is argue fiercely for what you believe in. And the second thing is never forget that everything in firefighting is parochial. It's local. Just because Bipperville does it doesn't mean Bopperville has to do it. And just because Kipperville does it doesn't mean Copperville has to do it. You got to do what's right for Louisville. You got to do what's right for Trophy Club. You got to do what's right for Wichita Falls. You got to do what's right for Albuquerque or Tulsa, or wherever you find yourself. And that's what makes the fire service the fabric of the community. That's why we're so important in hard times, because we are the community. We take care of it. We nurture it. We grow it. We love it. I mean, we're wedded to our communities, and what works for us may not work for you. And that's fine. Go to Bipperville. Like Scott said, he had guys, I'll go back to Copperville. Good for you. Go back to Copperville. We're going to do this. So I love you guys. I'm now 10 minutes late.
Thanks, Bobby.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bobby, for the invite. Very honored.
Well, and Terry, Scott, kind of as we move towards finishing this one up, but I think one of the points Bobby made too, and John, is good bosses monitor their people, because there's guys and gals that come in tired. They come in a little under the weather. They come in, they got, kids crying all night at home, newborns and things going on and so on and so forth. And that's no different than me walking in and seeing Tommy Yasena, who's him and his captain, Tom Mack, are awesome. Right. And seeing Tommy and going, what are you doing? I was at this whole college all night. Well, you know what? Just go hit the rack. And there's guys who, oh, you got to toughen up. Really? Are we, we getting so sensitive with the fire? No, I'm not saying that. I'm like, let the guy go crash for a little bit and push a reset button for himself. And that was on a 24-48. So I think maybe the biggest point, is we just talked about briefly 2448s, 2472s, 4896s, the FDNY schedule, the Detroit schedule, and a bunch of other schedules. There's a whole bunch of other ones out there, variations. And if you talk to those guys, I think most of them would tell you we love what we're working. Now, some guys want to switch from 2448s to other things, but when I guess let me reword that. If you look at one and go, that's kind of a weird shift. I never figured out the FDNY one. You got to do days. We'll get married to do mutuals. I'm like, well, then why did you switch it? Well, because nobody's allowed to work more than a 24. You have someplace, and I go, and they love that shift. I'm like, okay, it's like John or Bobby said, it's local. Whatever works. Back to like the rig check stuff. I'll stand my ground saying, so I'm on a call at 2 a.m. and get back at 3:30. All right. Normally you start banging pots and I always say pots and pans. Wake me up at 6, and I got mandatory, let's say, to check the rig, or I'm doing a 48. But you decide Scott is my captain and let me stay in the rack a couple extra hours just so I can reset for the rest of the day. Like I would if I was at home, I had to go do a side job. I don't understand where that $900,000 rig is going to be any different from 2:30 in the morning to 9 in the morning. You know what I'm saying? I'm still going to, like I said, most good drivers, if I'm going to go check it anyway, we're going to make sure, there's so many different ways to look at that. My thing was, it goes back to, what do you guys want to work? And if we do this, you have to make sure it works. Like the split with the 4096 is the split mandatories. If 4096 actually has every 48-hour shift has 2 shifts. You have an A and a B within it. And if I'm on A, I'm on the mandatory list for hanging over. If I'm on the B, then I'm on the mandatory list for coming in. And if we call you, don't do like you do now. Don't answer that they want me to come and work. No, if you're at the top of the list, you have an hour to return your message, you're in trouble, because otherwise the system ain't going to work. And if you call in sick for those 2 days, which means you're off 10 days, you probably need your doctor's note, because we're giving you all these days off, or first, have or second. But firefighters are some of the most progressive, forward-thinking, creative people I know. Tell me I'm wrong. They'll make it work if they want to work. Is that what's happened in the county, Scott? Did they make it work there? I'm sure not everybody was on board with it, but if they want to work, it will, right?
Yeah, Rick. And we had, I think, back 82% that wanted it, and today there's probably only 6 out of 100 that don't. But that's exactly what I said. You guys got to make this work, and if you make it work, then it will work. And to this point, it has. There's some challenges. Getting somebody to come in on the second half of the tour, the second shift of the tour, is a little challenging. Getting people to come in for special events is, I think, a little bit more challenging than it was when we were 2448s. But short of that, yeah, the guys they're making it work, and they police themselves. We have what we call an R&R, rest, nutrition, and rehab period. They let their BC know, hey, we're gonna take a couple hours here to rest or whatever, and we give them a little extended lunchtime where we don't plan anything, so they can use that downtime. I think it's from 11 to 1, where we try not to plan stuff. And so for us, but we're not a super busy department, compared to somebody like Albuquerque. So we kind of have the ideal situation for it. Plus, how the houses are around here. It is tough to live in the Metroplex on a new firefighter salary. And so all those things, I think, play into recruitment and retention, and making it someplace where people want to be and stay.
Well, like some guys that do 2448 love having the Kelly days, and they would fight you with a knife to switch that shift. So it goes back to, if you want it to work, whatever's going to work for your guys. I'll throw this in there. I'm going to ask Terry a quick question. A lot of what we talk about all the time when it comes to leadership is about the upper echelon having an open mind. We talk about good bosses are approachable, but part 2 of that is being open-minded, because a lot of them are approachable but not open-minded. And the 3 of us, some of our best ideas working together, as long as we work together, some of our craziest ideas came from some of our newest people, and they were awesome ideas if you're willing to listen. It's the people, that's stupid. I don't like that word anyway. That's not going to work. But well, wait a minute. Once in a while you got to go, guys, that ain't going to. First one of the budget, or it's not going to work. But when you shut out input from your people, I guess I'm throwing towards when you shut down that and make your own mind up without kind of considering everything. And there are times you go, inside, I know this is bullshit. I know they're just trying to pull this to do that. You know that, because we didn't parachute into fire service yesterday ourselves. but I still think bosses have to stay open-minded to, and Terry, one more.
But no
time.
is easier, you know, Rick, no is easier avoiding it. It's how you going with the attitude, how do we make this work, or what are all the excuses it won't? And, you know, a lot of bosses just don't like change. Let's leave it status quo, and it's easier. It's the path of least resistance, but you're exactly right.
Well, and some guys think that all their guys are trying to do is do everything the easy way out, get as much money as they can, do as little work as possible. And you know, is that true with some? Yes, but that's not true. The majority of firefighters, I mean, don't fall into that, you know. But T, one more time, the marketing of whatever shift it is, whether it's 4896s or whatever, that package has to be sold to the bosses, to the city. But you know what it's like. You're trying to hire people. Scott is. It's not that easy anymore. So you've got to have some hooks when it comes to grabbing people, right?
Well, I mean, I listen, I think if you were going to go and pitch any program, you know, first of all, is there a cost associated with it, and how do you navigate that? And that's important because, you know, the other thing is that I guess if we're simply saying from a recruiting standpoint that we will garner more interest in our jobs, listen, I'm telling you, I think we might, but I don't know that. And I don't know because I haven't done any research on it. So I guess where I get what strains me about when we talk about ideas and implementing ideas, and a lot of times people come forward with ideas, and I'm not saying they're good or bad, but they don't bring enough data. They don't bring enough. It's just a lot of I think, and you know, some of the words I hate the most around here are a lot and all the time. I don't know what that means. You know, well, like how many times does that happen? Oh, it's a lot. And I'm like, what, you know, and when you actually look into it, it's twice. It's happened twice in 10 years. So, you know, I think that the 2448 is a perfect example. 2448, 4896, you know, whatever the next thing, because there'll be a next thing. It'll be 5 years. We're going to be talking about we'll work 4 days and have 12 days off, or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, because this thing's perpetual, it's never going to end. It's always going to be something else. But bring me facts and data and things that support what you're saying. And also, this can't be a one-sided scenario, because what we're, you know, I love Chief Salka continuing message, no matter what you're talking about, is at the end of the day, it's about those people. And how can we deliver the best service to those people? Now, can we do it on a 4896 and do it with a minimal impact or cost to the city? And is it beneficial to the employees? That's a win-win-win. And if that's the case, then, you know, I think it's a hard argument to stand it in front of. But if it's something that's impactful to what we're ultimately trying to do, which is deliver a service to the people that pay us, then that's where we have to take a hard look. And I'll get back to my last and final point. We'll make this work or we won't. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. I think that the majority of our people and the majority of anyone's workforce are dedicated, compassionate, or passionate and compassionate, but they're very focused on what it is and dialed into what they're doing. And so you're going to give them the tools necessary to do the job, and you go out and you hit it out of the park. And that's what we would expect about each and every person. So it's truly up to, you know, if a fire chief wants to go down this road and he takes this leap of faith and goes in and says, okay, well, we're going to do this, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to work out. I would do that with the sincere hope that everyone over here is giving me 100% to make sure this works, so that it's a win-win for everybody. Hey, the workforce got what they wanted because, as Chief Salka eloquently says, they want 4 days off, right? And I mean, I'm not naive. No one's naive. He just says it very, very candidly. But you have to work as hard as we're going to work to implement it and make it work for everyone, and so that it's successful. And I'm not talking about 4896, whatever program we roll out, right? We make a decision, let's move forward and work to make it the best.
Well, and again, I think the bottom line is, like you said it, Scott, everybody said it. The end product here is, what are we doing to deliver the best service possible to the people out there? we said and put our hands up to serve and protect, and the troops will make it work. Some of it's a recruitment issue, and that makes sense. Some of it's, some places things work a lot better than other places. I'll go back to how many different variables are out there today that are working, so it's about what works for your people. So I agree with you. End result is it's got to be great for those people out there. To me, I worked at 24/48. It worked fine for me. I thought, God, when I had my roofing business and other things, I would have loved to have done a 48/96. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There were times I worked a lot of 48s, and it wasn't that big a deal. I mean, we were busy and all that stuff. So forth, mandatory, or just working over for a guy, we'll get off a ball. Again, it comes down to whether you're going to make it work for your people or not. So, and do the homework, right? Call the people. That's what I meant. Albuquerque, people are surprised. Albuquerque has stations that, I said it before, run their wheels off. They are always in the top of runs. Ask them and call the firehouse. Go, hey, I work in, Bopperville over here. We're thinking about going to this for you guys have been doing this since the 80s. There's got to be something at firehouse that don't like it. Why? Or what? You tell me why. You guys actually work it, have worked it. You've been here 30 years, Cap. What? And you've been working this for 30 years? And, do your research so you can make a good, educated, informed decision. So, Scott, if they want to get a hold of you, and congratulations, by the way, on Keynote in 2024,
man.
That'll be awesome at FDIC.
You're going to have to mentor me, Rick. I'm going to need some help with this. Okay.
You'll do just peachy.
Scott at fireserviceleadership.com. And we just went to it a year and a half ago. So, man, I get calls from chiefs weekly. I wish chiefs worried as much about training and things like that as they do about this, because I get wore out. But so we've got some
Good
stuff
point.
put together. I'll be glad to share whatever we can. Like I say, it's positive in our organization. I don't think it is for everybody, but for us, we make it work. And I'm proud of our guys for doing that. But feel free to reach out to me and I'll help you any way I can.
Perfect. It's got to work for your people. And if they want it to work, it will. Terry, closing?
No, again, yeah, just do your homework and again, leave the emotion out of it. Be the open-minded. I think there's a litany of changes we've all experienced, whether you've been in this business for 5 years or for 40 years. There's always something you look back on that we weren't doing back. I just told somebody the other day I was moving something in my car, and it was a contractor for a project we were working on, and he looked and he goes, "Is that a bulletproof vest?" I said, "Yeah, it's ballistic. It's ballistic armor. Everyone has one." And he was just, he's shocked. And I go, it's a different world and it's a different time. And no one sitting here today thought 15 years ago that was going to be in my car. So listen, it's just, you got to be willing to look at everything. And maybe it's great, and maybe it's not. I don't have that answer, but I'm here at Louisville. T. McGrath at cityoflouisville.com. Scott, I've got a few favorites stories that you have that are favorites of mine, and I'll throw those to you. Make sure you work those in your speech.
Well, everybody knows how to get a hold of Chief Halton. Just open up the magazine or go to the website. He already gave you his phone number. Our good buddy John Salka is at chiefjohnsalka@gmail.com. I'm Chief Lasky at gmail.com. And another great show, another great topic. And I love the fact that we have 5 of us that have 5 different opinions. And these are conversations for our listeners, our viewers, that we have without being on the air. We get into stuff. That's how we start this whole thing. Let's take it to the air and let's just talk opinions and, thoughts and processes and throw it out there for people to make their own minds up. So it's about doing that. We're all on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and the web. So if you're looking for us, just head over there for that. Our next show is September 21st. We always have the third hump day of the month, the third Wednesday. We always remind you that Fire Engineering has some awesome hangouts on Wednesdays, as well as the podcasts in the evenings that we all do. In closing, we ask you this every time, and on several of our different shows that we do, to please keep the men and women, armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember this, never forgetting means just that. Never forgetting. Thank you. God bless you. And we'll see you next time.